Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Professor Holbrook's uh, rantings and lectures on history, Latin America, religious studies, research methods. So this week I'm starting a new series on Introduction to Brazil. This is meant for undergraduates primarily, but anyone can enjoy it. It's an interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary introductory course about some basic history of Brazil, and then we'll look at the society, the culture, the economy from several different disciplines. So strap in, fasten your seatbelt, and let's talk about Brazil. I'll be using notes taken from Thomas Skidmore's Brazil, 5 Centuries of Change, which is a book about 250 pages, a light introduction to the history of Brazil. So here we go. So the outline is why read about Brazil? Why should we care about Brazil? The Brazilian society, which is very unique. The comparison of Brazil's geography with the United States and some of its culture, its multiracial social structure, and its national identity. So why read about Brazil? Brazil has created beneath a facade of harmony a very contradictory and enigmatic society. The contradictions include the mixture of peoples. Brazilians are a product of the mixture of peoples of indigenous, European, African, and it is a Portuguese-derived culture that binds Brazil together. These contradictions are also produced by the past promises of opportunity, which are negated by the present realities of discrimination, violence, and widespread poverty. And here is a rendering, a map of Brazil. You see that the other Spanish American republics are completely dwarfed. The largest might be Argentina, which is off part of the map there, but Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, Colombia, Venezuela, the Guyanas are all dwarfed by the size of Brazil, which is quite large. Brazilian society has one of the highest levels of inequality in the world. The ultimate contradiction is between Brazil's justifiable reputation for personal generosity, cordiality, and the fact that having to live in one of the world's most unequal societies. In a word, Brazil exemplifies all the problems of capitalism in the developing world. When I was taking a summer intensive in learning Portuguese in Rio de Janeiro, I remember that my wife and I had, on our way to the language school, had to step over bodies on the street of people who were still asleep in the morning, who were sleeping on the streets. It was a bit disconcerting. Brazilian society is very hierarchical. It's proved to be varied yet remarkably integrated, not on egalitarian terms, but hierarchical terms. The culture inculcates a sense of intimacy along with a sense of distance, thus allowing the elite to dominate society with little fear of challenge. Our main task is to ask how this society emerged and what keeps it from becoming more open and egalitarian, which has been the declared aim of national leaders at least since the proclamation of the Republic in 1889. So here's a map of Brazil superimposed over a map of the continental United States. And as you can see, they're roughly similar, although Brazil is slightly larger than the continental United States in terms of square miles. How did Brazil hold together? This is one of the things we want to read about and ponder in history. If I were to go back here to this other map, you see the Spanish American republics from Venezuela all the way down to Uruguay and Argentina down below. And then above Venezuela, of course, are the Panama, Costa Rica, Nicaragua, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and then above that is Mexico. Basically 21 Spanish American republics at the time of independence. So Spanish America broke up into 21 nation states. Portuguese America remained one single colossal country called Brazil. And of course, part of that is because it wasn't separated, as many of these other countries are separated by geography. But Brazil is one integrated landmass. So, but nonetheless, the question is, how did Brazil achieve its independence and become a such a large singular country without breaking apart as Spanish American countries did? How did it cohere? Modern Brazil is even larger than continental United States, while Spanish South America fragmented into the contemporary nations. Meanwhile, Brazil cohered not only culturally but politically. This is one of the more stunning accomplishments of nation building in the modern world. Brazil is also a relatively successful multiracial society. There are problems with it, as we shall see, but there's been, depending on how you measure it, you could argue that Brazil has had some success at developing a multiracial society. One fact that's little known is that outside of Africa, you have the largest population of people of African descent in the world are living in Brazil. It has one of the most richly varied indigenous populations as well. There now Brazil has three principal ethnic groups, plus later immigrants, including Asians, mixed to produce a nation which has long lacked legally defined racial barriers. What legacy has created this for a semi-modern, increasingly urban, partly industrialized society? In terms of politics, you have a very small political elite at the top of the social pyramid in Brazil, and they've been very successful at diffusing and deflecting popular protest. Again and again, the threat of revolution has been averted by shrewd, conciliatory, and co-optive moves by those in power. The result has been a remarkable continuity in the hierarchical social structure and the distribution of power of Brazil. And industrialization. Brazil is one of the most industrialized countries in what we generally call Latin America. Uh, it's led in one department overall that has not been a forte in most of the other countries of Latin America, and that's industrialization. Southeastern Brazil succeeded in building the largest industrial park in the third world by the 1970s. Of course, when it says in the third world, that would be including Taiwan, South Korea, Vietnam, and some of the Asian tigers. Industrialization has also created a dilemma: how to raise mass living standards in a labor surplus economy. And finally, what national identity has Brazil developed? Brazilians see themselves as very different from all other New World societies and claim to have produced their own civilization. Yet the inequalities and vulnerabilities remain. This is one reason why it can be legitimately debated whether to call Brazil part of Latin America or not. One of the reasons for switching from Spanish America to Latin America in the middle of the 19th century was to be able to include French-speaking territories in the Caribbean and to include Brazil in the title Latin America, because Portuguese, obviously, and French and Spanish were all derived from Latin, the Latin language. However, Brazilians certainly are not Hispanics in the United States, because Hispanic implies from Hispania, and Brazilians trace their heritage back to either Africa or Portugal or indigenous. And a lot of Brazilians do not consider themselves to be Latin Americans. because they see themselves as very different from Spanish America. And they're more industrialized. They have a very cosmopolitan music. They have a great culture. And so they have their own national identity, and probably many Brazilians would prefer just to be called Brazilian as opposed to Latin American. Only one thing is certain: their future would depend not only on their past, but also on their vision of the future. So that is the introduction to Brazil. We'll begin next week with the colonization of Brazil and some of the geography, and we'll trace that up through the independence of Brazil and the empire of Brazil, which lasted for about 60 years, and then on into the 20th century. So I look forward to seeing you here as we talk about Brazil. Obrigado. Até logo.